government's considering banning all public sector bodies from paying cyber criminals to release data following what are called ransomware attacks. It's all part of proposals to combat cybercrime. Joining us now, Security Minister Dan Jarvis. Very good morning to you, Mr. Jarvis. Well, we've just heard about a cybercrime, which is the use of these deep fake videos to lull people into a sense of trust in order to get, in the case of retired neuroscience lecturer Nikki McLeod, £17,000 from her. The criminals are one step ahead, aren't they?
They are at the moment, and that's why we need to bring in new measures to make sure that the cyber criminals, whether they are based in Russia or elsewhere, look at the UK as being a hard target. And that's why we're seeking to introduce a ban on public sector organisations, whether that's local authorities or hospital trusts or vital infrastructure organisations, paying ransoms to cyber criminals. We think that by putting in place a ban, it will mean that those cyber criminals will turn their attention elsewhere and will be much less likely to target the UK.
I wonder if you can, and appreciate what you're talking about. You're talking about big, you know, like, for instance, the NHS, which is targeted last year. But just on an individual basis, you know, a lot of our viewers are affected by these scams, by deepfake videos. We've even had a warning this morning because we got as a result of an interview we did about winter fuel allowance, a pensioner was rung up yesterday by the DWP. Of course, this morning, people are concerned, well, if I get a call from the DWP, how do I know if it's real or not? What do we do to help people when they are being scammed from outside, for instance, of the UK? What advice have you got for people in how to avoid this?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. So my Home Office colleague, Lord Hanson of Flint, he leads for the government on fraud. I know that he's working incredibly hard to look at, as a government, what more we can do to make sure that people have got all of the right advice and are incredibly cautious about the way that they conduct themselves online. I deal with matters relating to economic crime. We're working internationally with partners right around the country because many of these attacks originate from abroad. So we are looking at what more we can do to crack down on those people who are seeking to extort money, both from individuals, in the case that you've just highlighted, or in terms of larger organisations. So these are important issues. This is a priority for the government. We're working at pace to ensure that we reduce significantly the levels of criminality that we're seeing. And we think that the measures that we're seeking to introduce today will send a signal internationally that the UK is seeking to be a much harder target than has been the case previously, so that the cyber criminals will think again before targeting people and organisations here in the UK.
Very important work in your new role as Security Minister. Of course, in the past, you were the Mayor for South Yorkshire. You will know in detail the terrible events which happened in Rotherham, but also the failure of politicians and police forces to face up to what was happening, in particular with grooming gangs in South Yorkshire, but also in the Northwest and more widely. Do you understand why, it's not just political leaders, there are our viewers, victims, who all think that the unwillingness of the government to do a further inquiry into grooming gangs is a sign of a continuing cover-up, that you don't want to face up to being accountable for mistakes which were made in the past?
Ed, I do understand those views, but the truth of the matter is, it is quite the contrary, in the sense that the government think that the best way to get on and deliver for those victims and ensure that the perpetrators of those heinous crimes are brought to account is to fully implement the recommendations of the J report. This was an extensive piece of work. It took 7 years, cost a lot of money. Successive governments have failed the victims. We're not going to do that, and that's why we're working at pace to implement the recommendations from that important report, because we think that that is the best, most effective and the quickest way of delivering the justice that the victims absolutely deserve.
I understand that you don't want to repeat the J inquiry, the national inquiry into all child abuse. understand you want to act on these recommendations, but there's been a cacophony of different voices in recent days. Keir Starmer says he doesn't rule out another inquiry. Jess Phillips, your colleague, doesn't rule out another inquiry. Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, calls for a national inquiry. Paul Waugh from Rochdale, the MP, says he doesn't rule out another national inquiry. Now Sarah Champion, the Rotherham MP, one of your close colleagues, says we do need another inquiry, which should be nationally financed, locally led, so the victims can have their voice. It feels like there's a cacophony. Is the Home Office, do you need to bring some clarity and actually tell us what the government is going to do to answer these concerns? Not just action, but to get a deeper understanding of what went wrong.
Well, firstly, I completely understand why there are a range of views and why some colleagues in Parliament and outside of Parliament think that we should proceed in a slightly different way. I think fundamentally we all want to achieve the same objective, and that is justice for the victims and ensuring that the perpetrators are held to account. The view of the government is that the best way to do that is to get on and implement the findings of the J report.
When Sarah Champion from Rotherham says, when Sarah Champion of the Rotherham MP says, not a national inquiry, nationally financed, national powers, every local area, allowing victims to have a voice, summoning witnesses so that you can see across the country in every area what went wrong, that's a good idea, isn't it? Why don't you actually get on and do that? That's not a repeat of Jay.
Yeah. Look, Sarah Champion is a good colleague and I completely respect her view. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, they're working incredibly carefully and closely with the victims. We've looked obviously in detail at how the locally led inquiries have worked, and the priority is to get on and implement the findings from the J report. Professor J herself has said that she doesn't think there needs to be another report. We need to move at pace. We need to get on with this. I think the concern with another process, another body of work, is that it might take a protracted period of time and might delay the work that we're seeking to do in terms of delivering on the J report
Phillips
for the victims.
She didn't rule out another report. You're not contradicting Jess Phillips, are you?
Not at all. And both the Prime Minister and the Safeguarding Minister have both said that they don't rule out another report. But they've also both said that our immediate priority is to deliver for the victims. Successive governments have failed to do that. We are not going to fail to do that. They deserve justice. That is what we will work to achieve for them, as well as ensuring that all of those people who've perpetrated these heinous crimes are held to account for them.
Dan Jarvis, Security Minister, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.